So I'm not the only doctor in the house tonight. We've got several doctors. So this is great. That's right. Carol Swain is here. Professor Swain is an award-winning political scientist and former tenured professor at Princeton and Vanderbilt universities. Professor Swain, how has CRT changed our conception of civil rights? It seems to me in the 60s, injustice was defined by an unequal application of the law. Whereas today, it seems CRT proponents are saying that the law itself is unjust. Am I tracking with the difference of how civil rights has changed over the last few decades?
Well, Derek Bell, one of the founders of CRT, argued that white people only do what's in their interest, and that the civil rights laws that we passed in the 1960s that opened up opportunities for people like me. We had the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that desegregated, various institutions and opened up opportunities and attacked discrimination in employment. The Voting Rights Act, the Open Housing Act, all of those things aimed at eradicating discrimination in the law. He argued that, white people did it to serve their own goals. What is happening today is that the civil rights is getting lost in the debate because clearly white people are being targeted because of the color of their skin, and they're being discriminated against openly in certain situations. And many white people are not aware that they're covered by civil rights laws, but they are covered by civil rights laws and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So they have equal protection rights as well. And I think it's important for racial and ethnic minorities like me to stand for civil rights in its traditional sense and to speak up when whites are being discriminated against, the same as we spoke during our time of real oppression. But there were many white people that always stood with blacks, even during the time of slavery. There were the abolitionists, there were the people that set up the Underground Railroad, there were the white philanthropists. There were always white people that walked alongside racial and ethnic minorities. The true story of America is a story of us working together to be a better people. And I think a lot of that had to do with our closeness to our Judeo-Christian values and principles that guided our interactions with one another. And now that secularism has risen to the point that it has, I think that we don't have values and principles guiding our interactions. And I would argue that Dr. Martin Luther King is canceled because he wanted people judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. The progressives and the CRT people want people to be privileged because of the color of their skin, and they have no qualms about discriminating against white people or saying it's time for white people to be discriminated against. And what's really bothering me is that there are Black leaders who have been very successful, and they are making the case for equity in the form of lowered standards for their children and grandchildren. And so they would rather have a dumbing down of education to achieve some political goals that white progressives want, and white progressives never considered minorities equals.
Yeah, that's true. Right, especially when you get into the eugenics and that whole seedy realm. Horrific. How far has Christopher? How far has CRT infiltrated our cultural institutions? Obviously, we're seeing the white fragility nonsense. It's actually making her a lot of money as we speak, making its way into our corporate boardrooms and human resource departments. We're seeing it in our universities, professional sports, of course, Olympic competitions, and increasingly our military, who I guess we're too busy studying CRT and not enough about Taliban military tactics. So is CRT as ubiquitous as it seems? Is it really penetrated virtually everything?
It is, and the penetration of the military is the one that makes me absolutely insane, because as a Marine, I'm like apoplectic, right? Because what you do what the Marine Corps does to make a general population fighting force, which is to say they draw from the general population. It's not like the special forces where you're washing 70% of people out, right? The Marine Corps takes just about everyone, and it's produced in my, I'll every Marine will tell you this. I think they're the greatest fighting force in the world. The way they manage that is essentially by managing identity, right? So everybody comes in with their own background, and it's just overlaid and crushed with this Marine identity, right? This is who we are. We're all in the same boat. We all have the same, we have the same ugly haircut. We have the same ridiculous, you go through the list, even to the point where there aren't even white and black Marines. We talk about dark and light green, right? Meaning we're like the shade of the same color. And of course, it is true identity building by sort of creating a subordinate or superordinate identity that everybody comes into. And therefore, the little divisive things where I'm in this tribe, you're in that tribe, all those things are suppressed, right? So it is our unity that creates the strength. And what CRT at its core does is the complete opposite of that. It turns Marines and soldiers against their fellow soldiers and Marines. It also turns them against the whole idea of a common unity, right? Of the nation itself. And then we look at, for example, the military today bringing CRT into the armed forces, along with a bunch of other things that are just insane, whether it's the pain for sex transition surgeries for troops that actually involve injecting estrogen and literally making a man less combat able. Like this is supposedly going to improve our ability to fight and win wars, right? But so it's not a coincidence that a military that is systematically demoralizing and dividing its troops has these disgraceful losses like what we're seeing in Afghanistan. Like we have to start thinking the way the Israelis think. Like we're on a timetable. Right. If we have a war, we have years, a short period of time before a Democrat comes to office and undoes everything that we accomplish. Right. I mean, we have to basically assume that the opposition party has some substantial number of people, and this will grow as the next more woke generation fills out the party. But there are some substantial number of people who would view American defeat as a good thing because America is evil and racist and white supremacist, and that's their worldview. And so empire is impossible. It's done.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, that ship is sailed. That's a brilliant analysis. Wow. So I like the military metaphor. What do we do to fight back against this? What's our bombs? What's our strategy? Help us, Carol. Tell us, what do we do to fight back against CRT?
I believe that if judges follow the law, the civil rights laws, the statutory law, as well as the Constitution, that they have to strike it down when there are legal challenges. And I think that white people need to learn how to think and act like racial minorities, because they are racial minorities in many parts of the country. In 10, 15 years, they will be a minority nationwide. And right now we do have a constitution, we do have laws, so they need to know their rights, document discrimination, and file cases. And I believe that racial and ethnic minorities who care about justice and who know how it feels to be discriminated against, that we need to stand, with our white brothers and sisters, our fellow Americans, and fight for our values and principles about how you treat people. And one of the things that is un-American is that we don't shame and bully people because of immutable characteristics, because of the color of their skin. And it just seems ludicrous that people that would argue that it's wrong to do it to racial and ethnic minorities think it's okay to do it to whites, and they don't have empathy for white children who are being taught and told to hate themselves and their ancestors. And I find that very disturbing, and it's unacceptable, and we all should push back against it. But that CRT, that's one issue. And I do believe, I'm not going to say I believe, as of today, the book that Chris and I wrote, it's the best book out there for equipping Americans, because it's understandable. It's something that people can get through. It has the strategies, and with the glossary, it will help people when they are challenging CRT and then the school board or some official says, we're not doing CRT, we're doing DEI, or we're doing cultural competency, or we're doing culturally sensitive learning, and we're doing social justice, how they keep changing it. And in our book, we have resources where you can recognize what's taking place. And you do have to organize. That most people, we're not able to fight this alone. And so we have to organize. And if you're a parent, and something wrong is happening to your child, it's also happening to other children in the classroom. And teachers, they have rights too. And we just have to stand together. I think we will get through this moment. America has been through dark periods before, and so we will get past this, but knowledge is power, and people need to get as much knowledge as possible.
Wow. And we've been graced for such a time as this,
Right.
through no fault of our own.
And some of us are willing to fight to the death. I mean, we really are not. And I don't think that they realize that if you have strong values and principles, that you stand on those, and you don't have to wonder about what am I supposed to do in a particular situation. You draw on what's inside of you.
Amen.
Can I add something to what Carol just said? Because I mean,
Absolutely.
and I really appreciate that. There's something I think also that everyone needs to understand about framing these issues in a Marxist lens, and that's I think pointing out the way that white children in particular are being bullied and harassed by their teachers in classrooms. Like, you have to have a truly hard heart to hear some of these stories and think, oh, it's fine because their great-great-grandfather might have been one of the 1% of the country who owned slaves, right? 4% in the South, 1% nationwide. Okay. Right. But what it's, and I think it's really important that Carol points that out. So I'm going to point out the other side of it, which is that demonization and infantilization are two sides of the same coin. And when you classify people on the one hand as oppressors and on the other hand as oppressed, you degrade everyone involved. There's no dignity in that. There's no autonomy. There's no decency. So I'm always reminded there was, The White Man's Burden by Rudyard Kipling. There's this line that always jumped out at me. So he's describing the people who are being colonized, and he refers to them as half devil and half child, right? And it's the half child part that we always forget. But infantilization, when you say math is a white Western construct, showing up on time, working hard, delaying gratification, these are white things. Like, it is so despicable and demeaning. If anyone hasn't read this, I wrote it down, the Smithsonian's Aspects and Assumptions of Whiteness and White Culture. Just Google that. It will blow your mind. Like, the way, the things that they're telling people, like, imagine driving over a bridge designed by someone who doesn't believe or believes that math is a white Western concept, right? And God forbid that you internalize whiteness by like, it's just,
well, the thing too,
well,
Chris, the other thing about what you just said is that they have identified the very factors that make for success and called them whiteness. Like, everyone I know that's been successful, they applied those values and principles, and they were successful because they were, the American dream is out there, but they're saying, no, it's not out there. It doesn't matter how hard you work. You're a victim. Racism is permanent. You can't overcome it.
Right.
You're either a victim or a villain. There's no redeeming part to it. And there's no, and from a Christian vantage point, there's no cross. There's no forgiveness. This is just something where you pay and pay and pay. Yeah.
And Steve, we have our churches deceived because the social justice warriors have gone into the churches. And so the Southern Baptists, they were the most conservative denomination. They're being torn apart by critical race theory.
They are. Yeah. It's so sad to see so many who feel, I don't know, I guess they just feel like you're the only way you can sound educated when you start talking about race and ethnicity is through the lens of cultural Marxism. It's just, those are the only frames of reference they know how to express themselves. It is a tragedy, especially in the church. The church should be leading, not following in this. You two are on the cutting edge, and you are my heroes. Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. I can't tell you how much this meant to me personally, as well as all our insiders, and hope these books get in as many hands as possible. This book gets in as many hands as possible, because this is a blessing. It's going to help a lot of people arm themselves as well as just to make sense of this time that we're in. So Christopher Schorr, Professor Carol Swain, I love
Thank you
that
so
book,
much.
New
Thank
White
you so
Nationalism.
much.
That was
Appreciate
an amazing read, big read, and amazing read. So
Thank
both
you
of you,
so much.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, what an interview. And there's just so much more. If you want to hear more of this Q&A, as well as actually becoming a live participant and asking your very own questions to the movers and shakers of the conservative movement all over the world, then you need to join our Insiders Club by simply clicking on the link below. Every week, you're going to have special access to some of your favorite conservatives across the globe, and you're going to love interacting daily with thousands of your fellow conservatives on our group chat and posting platforms. So make sure to click on that link below and join our Insiders Club and get your backstage pass to the worldwide conservative movement today.